Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, minutes are carried. Appearances, is there anyone here that wishes to appear in an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to unfinished business. Consideration of action on request by Robin Farrell, owner, for approval of a comprehensive signage plan
You can see it back
for the
there.
development Traced on the Water at 320 West Broadway. Welcome, Robin. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Beautiful day. So I'm back again. Y'all missed me from 2 weeks ago. We made some changes that you recommended. We did not make some changes that you recommended based on feedback from my signage company. So we redesigned the ground sign to add the fourth name that was dropped in the original design. We actually added it and felt best that it was under the Waypoint logo. It gives much more height to the other retailers within the space. We did keep the slight design element on that sign because it does match actually the blade signs, and so we were trying to keep a consistent element from visually when you enter the building to the waypointing signs on the boardwalk itself. The waypoint sign itself has been modified for the exterior beltline side of the building, and actually has a silver background now that outlines that sign. I actually think it looks very nice against the orange now with that change. They still are on two different planes, and they still are two different materials, still falling within the recommendations of what my sign company has recommended. And so that's why I've come back with that request. They feel that they do look different enough on the two different colors and the two different faces that they felt this was the better representation than having them stacked. So that's why I brought it forward that way again.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Sonia?
So this request was tabled from the last meeting on February 23rd. Changes were outlined by Robin, and approval is recommended as outlined in the staff report, and that's for 9 total signs. The landscape ground sign, 2 Traced signs, the restaurant sign, and 5 blade signs.
So I guess we should get a we need a motion to remove it from the table.
Removal?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there a motion for approval? Or do you want to have discussion first? Seeing none, we'll open it up for discussion. None? Okay, move around
approval.
the table. You start. Go ahead, Ron.
Start, I think what you did on the belt line frontage works. I like how you mirrored kind of materials and like the background, that metallic, and I think that looks good. I think it works even though it's on the same plane at 2 different heights. I think it's a big improvement from the orange. I just had a question. Are you going to maintain the orange on the ground sign?
He does. It doesn't render very well, but it is. There is a slight orange to his. It actually complements our siding pretty well, actually. So the color of the logo will be the same in both locations, but it doesn't need that silver metallic background that it has in the broad or Beltline sign. Between Broadway and Beltline, I keep going back. So the color, at least that's what Tim has told me, that the 2 waypoint signs will be the same color on both faces.
So is this rendering inaccurate? I'm confused.
I don't think it,
So this has got the orange background
right,
versus
but which is the same, all they did is they took that orange logo and they put a silver facing behind it to make it set out. That's not part of the actual logo on the Broadway, or the Beltline face. So if you'll see his logo below your hand on the left hand, it's still that orange, it still has an orange tint to it within the logo. It's just not as prominent when the silver's behind it.
Okay. And then,
What they've done is they've taken the original logo that's on the Broadway sign.
would that be the original logo? That would be that one.
Can we put the overhead on, please? I think the gentleman in the back will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's from the 23rd
Yeah, so what they've done is they've taken this logo
on the upper right.
on the upper right-hand side, which has that orange background to it, and on the Broadway portion, it's just, these don't render very well. There's actually, as explained to me,
And that's where everyone's confused as you
Right.
keep talking about the orange there.
And it doesn't seem to be part of the logo on that sign.
oh, they changed it on me. I apologize. This is what happens when you send stuff to the sign companies and you let the sign companies. So the sign will be different on the Broadway sign. So that orange is still their logo orange. So they are going to use that on the Broadway
Okay.
portion.
Okay.
Originally, they were going to have a sign, a silver, and then put a little orange behind the silver on the waypoint on the Beltline face, but they must have decided not to do that.
Okay. I think just the metallic with the letter lighting, I think it'll match kind of. It'll stand out differently because the color of the light is going to be different.
Right.
It's going to
And
light up
that's, I think,
differently,
where
but during the day, I think it'll definitely look better for the whole building.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then just the landscape plan didn't seem to reflect any sort of
We
changes.
do believe that we will have to move that tree, but we are holding that out until we're on site, and if we do move it, we will move it within the same design. I would like to keep it there, actually, because I like that tree in the entry, so that's why we haven't changed it at this point. The landscaper isn't quite sure if it has to move or not.
Okay.
Anything else, sir?
No.
Alderman Holmquist.
That makes more sense now.
Sorry.
And I just want to make sure I have the lighting for the Beltline ones correct. So the tray still will be backlit with,
The letters are individually lit.
okay,
And the waypoint sign, there's actually lighting behind the letters to illuminate the letters, but it's not, the letters themselves aren't individually lit.
and it's going to be illuminated in red?
My understanding, yes, it will be illuminate more in red or orange, because orange is their corporate color.
Karen?
I do like the look of the metal background and so forth on the elevation there, better than what you had last time. I'm a little confused on what size the sign is. The Trasta sign, where it's written on there, says maximum size 4 by 25, but when I look at the detail, the letters then are 3 foot 2 inches high by 24.4. But on Waypoint, the elevation says maximum size 5 foot by 20 foot, but we don't have any idea of sizing on those letters at all. So I don't know if it looks like that's a cabinet sign.
I believe it is a cabinet sign. I do not know the actual.
Do we think the cabinet is 5 foot tall?
Yes,
or-
the overall dimensions of the sign within the silver are the 5 by 20.
The cabinet is.
Right.
The box is,
Right.
okay.
Must be the cabinet.
Right.
Must be the cabinet,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd like to see, if we approve that cabinet sign, I guess I'd like to see that centered more. I think when you're driving past, and I just drove past there again tonight, twice, just to take a look at it, I think I see what they did, they centered between the edge of the building and the small little windows that are over on the right side. And I think you read that whole piece as a
Oh,
big
yep.
orange rust-colored piece, so I think that would look a little bit better if it was centered in there rather than, in the area that it is. That, to me, would look better. I still personally wish there was more of a relation between the two signs, but I'm not sure how to get you there, so. And Trying to think, I thought I had some other comment also. I guess on the ground sign, it's sort of the same thing. We don't really know what size the waypoint sign is, and maybe it's fine. I'm concerned again that public house under there is really tiny little letters, and I just hate for the tenant not to get seen when someone's driving past, etc. But it just, that detail just doesn't give us anything on sizes and so on. I see now that the tenant signs are 3.5 inches. The lettering, I believe, is 3.5 high.
Correct.
But on waypoint, we really don't have that detail. I wish, again, that waypoint sign, the background would come out at least flush with the tenant signage size below,
No,
rather than
that's-
be tinier. I just think
Yeah,
the more
that's-
lined up it all is,
Right.
the easier it is to read when you're driving past and things. I know that one of the commission members had a problem with that angle on the top. It's fine if you want to have it. I'm sorry, but it does not relate to these signs at all. This is a whole different angle going in the opposite direction, so whoever's telling you that, yeah, whatever, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine with me. I guess that's all I've got right now.
Mr. Dorschel? Mr. Omberg?
I think it looks pretty good. I like Sharon's comments. I wasn't here, of course, the last meeting, but I'll just give you my explanation anyhow. I understand the comments of the commission on these signs, but I looked at it differently. When I looked at this being about the same distance down from that eve as that's down from that eve, because that's your garden, roof
It
garden,
is,
right?
correct, yeah.
So when I was looking at it in 3D in my mind, I'm seeing a similar distance from the eave line, or the roof line that I'd see driving by as I see here. So for me, I didn't even think about it until I read the comments. I thought, oh yeah, that's right, we do like to line them up, but then in 3D it looked to me like, this might make some sense if they're really determined to have it that way, and since we'll allow no other signage on that building, we know what we have there. I'm not thrilled with cabinet signs, but I prefer the individual ones with the backlighting are beautiful. I mean, this sign would be extraordinary if these were individual letters, and like we did down on Monona Drive coming up there, we backlit them with LED, and if you see it just glows, and
Yeah,
it's
mine will
just,
be
it's a gorgeous,
LED.
gorgeous sign that way. Yours won't be LED if it's a
Oh,
cabinet sign.
no, Waypoint isn't mine,
No.
Trista's is.
A
yeah.
Waypoint
Right.
would be a much more attractive sign, in my opinion, if it had those individual lits with that LED back there, and you get all the colors you want. I think that would be a really nice sign, but, and then maybe use the, trying to tie the silver in, that could just be a plate or something up against the building, and that would make it a lot nicer sign, but if we're good with that one, I'm good with it. Again, I think it's an attractive signage package, and I think the landscape ground sign, that angle doesn't bother me at all. Gives it just a little bit of a flair for something different. I know, I understand. I read all the minutes, but it really doesn't bother me.
No, if she wants it,
I think it's certainly
fine.
your preference. It's not, we've approved a lot worse signs. Should I say that out loud? You're not taping this or anything, right?
What does that mean?
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Move approval of 3 conditions recommended by staff, and condition 4, that the waypoint sign on the belt line frontage be centered in the orange field. And that condition 5, that the faces of the individual signs on the landscape ground sign are flush with one another.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is there a second? Second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Robin.
Thanks. Have a great day, you guys.
No, thank you. New business, 6A, review and approval of updated housing element of the comprehensive plan. Sonia?
Okay, so there's a lot of data in this element of the comprehensive plan. In general, it provides an inventory of the existing housing stock, and that includes housing type, occupancy characteristics, household composition, household tenure, value, affordability, age, and condition. And then in the second section, it looks at projected housing needs related to single-family housing, multifamily housing, possible ways to increase types of housing under housing mix strategies, and then it provides an overview of resources and programs, and finally goals, objectives, and strategies. Just some general trends identified in this element. Monona has a very small household size. That's a consistent trend across the region and the country, but Monona's housing size is the smallest of all cities and towns in Dane County at 1.99. We have a stable population, possibly increasing gradually. Our age of population, again, will impact housing. Our proportion of older adults above the age of 65 is the highest proportion out of any city in Dane County. So combined with the older age, the single family, or the older age and the small household size, there looks to be a demand for smaller units, and we can also expect a turnover of single family homes in the future. 40% of our population, 40% of our housing units are occupied by individuals living alone, and of that 40%, 15% of them are over the age of 65. So those are some of the bigger trends. Just wanted to point those out and then kind of go through by section and just address comments and questions as they come up.
So how do you want to tackle this, Sonia? Do you want comments, or do you want to just go through each section and ask?
If we start with the existing housing stock and
Yep.
go through our characteristics, yep.
Okay, page 2-1. Comments? Question I had, it said that Monona's population is stable. We've actually had a decrease. Is that a...
We talked about this a little bit when we looked at the issues and opportunities element of the comprehensive plan, and although the Department of Administration was projecting a decline, we talked about different factors that contributed to what could be stabilization of the population.
Okay. Other comments on that section?
We're just doing 211 or all?
2-1, let's do 2-1-1. Let's just go step by step. 2-1-1, going once, twice. We'll move on to 2-1-2. Chris?
What's the difference between a single family attached and a 2-unit or a 4-unit? I don't understand. If it's detached, there's more than one unit to it, and I'm wondering why we have a separate category for it. And how would I know if I were living in a duplex, which one is it even is?
It's a good question.
So how good is the data?
I don't know for sure what the difference is. Diana, do you know? Sorry, put you on the spot. We could look into the definitions from HUD and see if they clarify that for us.
It seems to me that average person making out that survey isn't going to know the difference between it, and I would think we'd merge those two items, the single family attached and the 2 to 4 units. There could be, typically a single family attached is not something over 4 units. Typically it's a 2 or a 3 unit, but like the condos on Monona Drive, those 3 that were built, they might consider themselves a single family attached, but you tell me what the difference between that and a 2 to 4 unit is.
Right.
I don't.
Yep.
I don't know.
Okay.
Dr. Holmquist?
One possibility, maybe it's just academic, might be single family attached would be more like a duplex. You have your own entry, where a 2 to 4 unit might be a shared hallway that then...
2 unit wouldn't have well, I doubt it.
It'd be very unusual.
Yeah.
But, like I said, purely just fun to think through.
I think Sonia, to look into it, and if it needs to be changed, once you figure that out, that'd be great. Brian?
Okay, so then I have a question when it comes to, so the last sentence in 212, between 2000 and 2010, 126 new single-family detached units were built, and then 324 total new housing units added. But then when I look down below, I tried to figure where those numbers get made up, because in 2010, you have a total in Table 2.2 of 4,261, but at the beginning of this sentence, it indicates there's 4,088.
Yeah, there are a lot of different data sources going into it, and I think it might be the 126 new single-family detached units that were built that could have been exchanging one that was already existing, tearing it down, and then providing a building permit for a new one to be built in its place. But something I could look into again.
What do we mean then by 324 new total housing units?
Out of 324 new units, 126 of them were single-family detached units
Okay,
between that 10-year period.
okay.
I can clarify it.
Okay. Anything else on 212? Moving on, 213, occupancy characteristics. Brian?
On page 3, the paragraph that starts with general data, roughly halfway through that paragraph, it talks about in 2000, owner 40% of, okay, no, I'm not lining up here. In 2000, owner vacancy rate.
Owner-occupied
Yep.
vacancy rates.
So that was just one correction, but then at the next sentence, it talks about in 2013. But then if you go to the data in table 2.3, it's talking about 2010. So we're referencing 2000, 2010, and 2013, but they don't all match up.
So the 2010 table, the table with the 2010 data is from the decennial census, and that data was used in that table so that we could have a 2010 measure of all those different characteristics that are in the table: housing units, vacancy, values. All of those are from the year 2010, and then not all of that data is available from the same data sets as vacancy. So there was a data set for 2013 for vacancy. We wanted to go from 2010 to 2013 to try to get a more accurate estimate of what the vacancy looks like today, a little closer than 2010. So it gives us a little closer picture, but we could just do it all as 2010 for consistency.
It makes it, and feel free for others to chime in here, it makes it difficult for me to read and track that without someone explaining the reasoning of why certain data would be pulled from different pieces and linked together, because then I was trying to figure out, okay, where'd this 7.6 vacancy number come from? And I can't look in the paragraph above that's supposed to give me the information on that to figure out what's the breakdown of that. How much of that was owner-occupied versus rental. So I'm not sure a neat way to clean it up, or if it even needs to be cleaned up, but just feedback. Down below, there's a sentence about halfway through the next paragraph that talks about compared to other cities in Dane County, Monona has the highest percentage of individuals living alone. I think that's intended to say individuals 65 or older living alone, to match up.
If that's true.
Both are true. So the 40% is the highest percentage of all individuals living alone. And then if you take just the 65-year and above age group, that's also the highest percentage for individuals that are 65 and older.
Okay. And is household different than units?
No.
So if, and this might be from pulling from the two different areas, because then we talk about total housing types, roughly a 4,000 number, 4,088 or 4,261 depending. But then when we reference it here, our totals don't come close. We're shy by quite a bit.
Okay, which section is shy?
Are you at table 2.4? Is that what
Yeah.
you're looking at?
Yep, if you take 2.4 and take the total, the first line of the 3,768, or, I'm sorry, the 3,777, and I compare that because that's 2010 to table 2.2, which is housing type 2010. When I add up the total number of units,
Well, how could you? How do you know how many are in the multifamily? Those multifamilies could be 30 units. They're not necessarily 5, it's just 5 and above.
and that would indicate that number should be a lot lower than the total number of households, because if you have a duplex of 4 units, wouldn't that be 4 households?
But they're saying housing type's 4261, and you're comparing that to the 7,
I'm comparing that to the number of households that we indicated.
Right.
So you're looking at 3,777 households versus
oh, okay, so because they do have households there, okay.
61
Yeah.
total units.
Oh, but that's HUD again, HUD versus US Census Bureau.
Yeah, and maybe some of it can't get
Maybe.
rectified, but-
apart, you're right.
Okay.
and I don't know if all of this can really be rectified. I'm just reading it with the eye for some detail of how I would link these numbers and be confused if they didn't line up
Right.
as a reader, but that's it in that section for me.
Did you want a question for you? Did you want to make a recommendation that if you're concerned about the inconsistency between 2010 and 2013, that we just focus on 2010?
Or maybe relook at that paragraph, and if there's a reason to keep the 2013, which I assume is because the 2013 is showing a continued decrease in the vacancy rate, because I think that links to some of the other sections. If that's the reasoning, maybe we want to reconsider how the paragraph tells that story, then it would be all right.
Okay.
Okay, so to point out the fact that it shows a decline in the vacancy rate in 2013, sort of an update.
Yeah.
Add some language to that. Mr. Homburg?
Yes, I have I don't know if it's a question, it is a question, it's a request for information, and it affects me on how I even look at this entire thing, but it's on table 2.3. I was shocked to learn that we're now less than 60% owner occupied in Monona. And I think we're getting to a point where we're becoming imbalanced in the city. I'd like to know how we compare to other municipalities our size. And we have it written in here that we need to encourage more and more apartments, and I'm wondering if we really should be, if we're so getting to the point of imbalance, if we should be putting it, so for me, it relates to whether or not I want to pass this thing tonight. I'd like to have that information. I'd like us to have a very thorough discussion on it. You know, apartments are in vogue right now. Everybody says, oh yeah, you got to do apartments, but look at what we have. We're under 60% owner occupied now. That's shocking to me. I think most people, if they found that out, it would be shocking to them. So do we truly want to have the housing element and even our land use element, which we already have the rough draft done on, say, yeah, we've got to crank that up, when we're already, I'm going to assume, way above the normal. And that's why I'd really love to get that data from some other communities and see where they're at, what their balance is compared to where we're at, because I think we're unbalanced towards the apartments, reading this. Or the rent, I shouldn't say apartments, towards rental property versus owner occupied.
See if this might help. It's, I'm gonna put it on the document camera too. This is percentage of housing type, single-family detached versus multifamily. So in Monona, the percentage of our housing type in single-family detached is 58.5%.
I guess I'm not looking at purely that, I'm looking at the
Right.
percent of rental. And clearly, when we encourage apartments, we're encouraging 100% rental. And that, we have a lot of homes that are rental homes. And I think it's great to have diversity in housing stock. I think we have to have it. I'm all for it, but I think we still need to have a balance of stakeholders in the community that are here on the long term, and they're here to create value in the community versus somebody that's here for a year or two. I think there's an important balance within our community, and I'm not sure we're on the right side of it right now.
So Sonia, it's single-family detached. That would not include condos.
Correct.
So if you add condos to stakeholders, owner occupied.
Absolutely, but what I'm looking at is versus rental. This isn't rental.
That's,
Because a number of the single-family detached are rental in Monona, a lot of them,
I understand,
okay?
but if you take the 58, up there, the 58.5, why that's not 59.5, but anyway.
At 84, 93,
And then you add
94%.
you add to that the stakeholders that are condo owners.
Mhm.
That number grows.
It's probably that missing 6%. Potentially.
That's a point, yeah. And relative to Madison is so skewed with student housing, but compared to Fitchburg, Middleton, even Sun Prairie and Stoughton, I think we're positioned pretty good compared to our neighboring communities.
I think what is pointed out is the difference is single-family homes, although you might not be able to put restrictions on, is it owner occupied or rented out, that by zoning and other methods, you can influence or encourage certain types, where if you're putting in a multifamily unit that is able to be converted to condominiums, but it might be built as initially as apartment living, that might be one way that someone might do it, but is that what was intended by this slide, or the intentions that you were talking about, Jim?
I'm looking at Sun Prairie. There's 51% single family. Multifamily is 21, so that's 72%. So where's the rest of it? Where's the other 28%? So I'm not sure if the information that Mr. Umberg's looking for is...
No, it's not.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, this is percent of homes, but you're looking for percent of owner occupied versus rental, correct?
Which we
This is
have,
two different
which we
sets
got out
of-
of the U.S. Census Bureau data, and that seems to be a little more consistent than the HUD data, even in this report.
And you want it compared to,
I'd sure like to know. It seems to me we're pretty high. And for me, that means on the rest of this, I might not be so inclined to say we need to put more density in, depending on what that density is.
Well, is it density or is it owner occupied?
It's owner occupied.
Right, you want stakeholders, you want people that...
Oh, exactly. I want stakeholders in the community.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I don't want to get to the point where we're close to half the population is not even a stakeholder. And I don't mean that disparagingly towards a renter, but a lot of times they're renting because they know they're going to be moving on. They aren't going to be sitting on plan commission, city council, parks and rec board, all these things, contributing as much to the community. They don't have the stakeholder. I mean, they're not. And
Yeah.
you look at the committees we have, it just doesn't happen.
So over the long term, we're not going to dramatically increase the number of single-family homes that can be built. So the ratio between single-family and multifamily will probably continue to trend towards more multifamily development, whether it's condos or rental.
Possibly.
So because of the fact that we're landlocked, how do we maintain the ratio that we have currently and also add more housing units?
On the other side, you've got business community that needs customers. And back in the 20, 30 years ago, we were at 10 grand, or, 10,000 people. The households were larger than what they are now. So where do the customers come from that everybody wants all these cute shops up and down and around in our neighborhood? Where do they come from if they don't have any customers?
Well, fortunately for us, we're not a standalone community. We're surrounded by Madison and a lot of other communities. I mean, Dane County's over 300,000. The east side of Madison, where we draw from, has got to be in certainly the tens of thousands for our businesses. There's a line where our border is, but people cross those lines. So I wouldn't say just because our community is only 7,000 or 8,000, that's all we can draw from.
But the type of shops that you get comments on, they want, we want Monona Drive to be pedestrian friendly, where people are going to walk up and down and go to places. We're not talking about destination types of, like Walmart's obviously a destination business. People from their entire region come for that. But if you're going to get coffee at a shop on Monona Drive, you're probably going to be from the area, and they need bodies. So I can see, I guess, compared to some of these other communities, if, for lack of any other information, just looking at that, I don't see where we're out of line. I mean, we're second highest single-family percentage in that grouping.
I'd like to know rental
Yep.
versus owner-occupied. I think that's the key for me. And I think the key for me, if we're looking for more density, then we need to, if it is what I'm thinking it is, we need to focus it more on owner-occupied multifamily versus rental multifamily, and that would be the thing that would change it and get the balance back for us as a community.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's an important thing to be talking about in the housing element.
Is that something you have or you can get? Sonia?
I'll look into it to make sure it's accurate.
I'm going to assume if they had that type of data for us in the U.S. Census, they had it for other communities.
All I have right now is the average home ownership rate in Dane County is 61.7%. That includes Madison.
Okay.
Yeah, but define home ownership, because that single,
Well, and we have this as one of the objectives at the end, is to promote ownership in the city to increase the number of owner-occupied houses. I mean, I think one of the policies that are kind of put forth in here addresses this whole issue of how is it that, regardless of the type of housing stock and how we promote different redevelopment pieces, that is one of our goals, is to just to make sure that some of that addresses the issue of not becoming imbalanced in that area.
so, request for information, so Samuel will dig through to get that. We'll come back to this then, if that's okay with everybody. All right? Anything else on 213, or can we go to 214? For discussion, thank you. Housing age and condition. It scares me when it says we have a D rating and that's average.
I would have done better in school.
I know.
That could have only helped.
Any comments on 214, or is it pretty straightforward?
So the sentence that has the footnote for number 6, which is really, I'm wondering if much of that information really should be in the body of the text and not a footnote.
So that people read it.
Yeah, because
It's important.
it seems like it's not referencing other data, it's a statement, so.
Okay.
Good catch.
The second paragraph, last sentence, where it talks about meeting the needs of new families with children or those households planning future expansion. And I'm not sure if that future expansion is referencing additional family members, or if that future expansion is referencing something different than that. So we just might want to consider cleaning language on that. Other than that, look good.
Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on to 215, housing value. Here we go back to 2000. Is that the most recent info we have?
It goes on to 2010 in the next page.
Okay.
It's a comparison.
So the comment I had here was, this doesn't take into, it gives you the impression that, wow, it almost grew, $70,000, but that doesn't take into account what was the growth in the region in value of home. I'm not sure if that's important here, but it struck me as well. All this is saying is 10 years later, there was $70,000 of equity built. And is that comparable to the surrounding area or not?
To me, I think Table 2.6, though, shows where you fit in. So I don't know if it's...
But that's only talking about 2010.
Mm-hmm.
If that same one had 2000, then I think it might match up. Maybe it's not as needed. But speaking of Table 210, I'm interested why we don't use Cottage Grove. Since it's a community that
We share a school district with.
and a lot of people, when they are looking to move to Monona, balance and weigh that of, well, where do I want to live and why?
So the reason is from the Dane County Housing Needs Assessment Report. They divide their data between cities in Dane County and villages and towns in Dane County, so Cottage Grove falls into that other category. But for our purposes, I can take Cottage Grove and throw it in.
What about McFarland?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it'd be nice for all these, for the percent owner occupied and all that, because that's a very comparable community.
Okay.
So, Brian, are you asking that we show the growth between 2000 and 2010 on Table 2.6?
And I would like to know if others see it this way or not, and I could just be having tunnel vision here, but when I look at the Table 2.5 and read the materials before, it wasn't striking information. It was like, okay, you just told me what the growth and the equity of the home was. It didn't necessarily say, how is that in comparison to other communities or Dane County at large? There is a last statement in the paragraph above that talks about the average for Dane County median value owner occupied, but that's really in reference to Table 2.6, which almost seems like that sentence really is disconnected with the paragraph it's in and should go with the paragraph below.
So switch table, the
Switch to
priority.
the last sentence.
Switch the tables?
Or switch the tables, or
Clean it up.
clean it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great information. There's just some pieces I think that would make it wonderful reading. That's sad. No.
Anything else on 215? Mr. Omberg?
Well, if I could suggest just to the point you were making is, once we see the information, then you'd know whether or not you want to have it part of the table or just have a sentence that describes it. It's hard to know without that information. So if you get a bunch of data and everybody had similar growth, it might just be a sentence, we had similar growth the rest of Dane County, or we exceeded it. It might be something that simple. I'm not sure you want to clutter up the table, but it's hard to know without knowing what that data is.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Okay, let's move to 216, housing affordability.
I was left with the question at the end going, is there more to say here, or what does this mean? I don't have any specific feedback, but it just kind of left me with, huh, okay, now what? So I'm not sure where to go with that.
it makes a statement about where we're at, but how does that compare to the other communities? Is that something that we want to show here, or? You know, the other thing is, you're going to have, especially with senior housing, you're going to have, which we have a lot of, they're going to pay a large percentage of their income for their housing. Mr. Humbert?
I guess I'd say this is our comprehensive plan. Do we have to compare ourselves to every other community on every
No.
component of it? I mean, that's where it's appropriate, fine, but this is the data that she's put together about, this is who we are. This is where our people, our community lands. This percentage of the people are cost burden. It enters in the dynamic of a community, but I'm not sure every single thing we talk about has to be compared to the
Okay.
Dane County area.
Okay.
Does it?
No.
I might be wrong.
No.
Sonia, are you able to speak briefly to the connection of this section to the larger plan? And maybe I didn't catch it in the goals and objectives, because when I come out of this going, okay, almost 30% of owner occupied and approaching half of rental or cost burden, is that informing us to say, wow, we have too expensive of properties? Or is this meant to say, we need to look at, when we look at additional buildings, that it has a creative funding source for folks? I'm not sure how it fits into the
How to
bigger picture, maybe.
Connect it back, yeah.
So you keep creeping ahead to the back of the packet, but a topic to bring up would be, how do we address this? How is this issue addressed? So we'll get to, save that thought.
Okay.
Chris has.
Chris?
Is it an accurate issue? I'm going to go back again, sorry, but it's another HUD table. And it seems to me the U.S. Census tables were so much more accurate. And so a HUD has a table, where are they getting this data? Where are they deciding that, oh, yep, I'm cost burdened, I could use a break, I'll send it in. I mean, how accurate is the data? The Census Bureau, I would believe, is fairly accurate data. I'm not sure, it seems like these HUD data sets are not matching up really well with the Census Bureau. And I don't know a lot about how they gather their information, but perhaps it's not as comprehensive as the Census Bureau. And maybe people are inclined to say, yeah, I'm cost burdened. I mean, I don't know how they take the data. I don't believe I ever filled out a form to tell whether or not I'm cost burdened on my housing. Did you?
Who knows?
Ever see it?
Who knows?
Yeah, so it's nice information, but do we design our plan around it? Is it accurate enough for that?
Well, we'll get to that when we get to that section, but
Okay.
as far as this 216, is there any other modifications or changes that clarifications that folks would like? Seeing none, we'll move on to 22, projected housing needs. Let's do 221 first, single-family housing. Accessory dwelling units. So, housing above the garage, is that what you're getting at? Kind of a...
Accessory dwelling units are a separate living unit on the same property as a single-family property. So there would be two separate dwelling units on the same property, but they would be related to each other. And that they'd have the same owner, but the occupants would be living as separate household units in the two.
And I think we had an applicant not too long ago that had a structure that was turning into a mother-in-law's house, but do we want to make that something that we'd encourage?
No.
I don't think so either. So do we want to bring it up here?
No.
Other voices? They agree?
I agree. I think that's a mistake to adjustment. It's a strategy on our part.
So just scratch such as, and then just start with mixed use. Cross out accessory dwelling units. Okay. No further comment. We'll go to 222, multifamily housing.
I have another number. The 334 units here on page 22, we reference 324 new units. Whichever number we pick,
Be consistent.
let's make sure they line up.
Which page did you compare it to?
22. In the end of 212 paragraph, in the parenthesis there, at the top.
Okay.
Underneath condominiums, we might want to change the word "continue to drag after the Great Recession."
What would you substitute? Continues to recover?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if, well, and
Or just stop?
maybe we want to use
It's not
that
expected in
word.
the near future, period?
That's, would be a nice suggested edit.
Okay. Further comments? Mr. Homburg?
Well, this
sorry.
would be the place I'd want to have some verbiage about, if I find, I'd like to know where our rental is, and it might, the verbiage might be that we are looking to encourage owner-occupied multifamily, and if I might want to go under rentals, that instead of saying we are going to encourage mixed-use residential and commercial corridors, maybe we allow it in there, because I'd like to see where the numbers are, and certainly in a commercial corridor, mixed use, is almost always going to be rental. Not always, but almost always.
Yeah, I can agree with, make allow rather than encourage. And then after we get the information that you requested, we can come back to this section?
I think we should. I mean,
All right.
and I might be crying wolf, but it seems
Yep.
to me I'm not.
Nope. Anything else on that section? If not,
Oh, hang on.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Second sentence for senior housing seems like it's trying to put way too much into one sentence and difficult to read, so consider rewording it or breaking it into two different sentences.
Okay.
All right.
223, accessory dwelling units.
We delete.
Delete that whole paragraph. Yes, sir?
I think so. I think we could have a discussion about it sometime and look at it, but we'll, go into it easy instead of having it part of our comprehensive plan.
Right.
Because if it's in the comprehensive plan, I mean, I'm up there, standing there going, that's what you wrote.
Yep. Yep.
There was some discussion about it in the 2007 strategic housing plan, and the language, I think, landed on let's explore it more through research, so.
Mixed-use development. Seeing no comments, move to 231, federal housing resources. How does one define federally assisted affordable housing stock?
So 19 units received funding from Section 42 at Heritage Monona. So these are all projects by unit that received funding from these federal sources.
Okay, we had 5 units in Fairway Glen, didn't we, that had,
Right,
Is
and
that
I
a
was
different
looking for
program?
that too. Those are, I think they are Section 8 for people with physical disabilities. but I'm not sure.
Stepping, was a group stepping out or?
Moving Out
Moving Out,
LLC.
yeah.
So it could be the date of the data.
Okay. And Frostwoods has, Heritage, okay, all right.
How come, like, I mean, I really like this table. I didn't know how many Section 8, Section 42, 202s were in Monona, but how come, for example, your next table talks about Section 8, for example, the 8 single-family homes that aren't on the first table?
Well, these would have been, like Monona Meadows is probably a project-based.
Yeah, but that's not what it
Section 8.
says. It says federally assisted affordable rental housing stock.
But if I have a voucher, a portable voucher, I could rent, I could go to an apartment and just,
Understood, but for example, the Public Housing Authority has 8 single-family homes in scattered sites in Monona that are Section 8
oh,
dedicated.
and they're not on here.
And they're not on there.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what the difference is or why it wouldn't be.
I would think it'd be good to have them here.
Well, if we know, I enjoyed the summary of it. I've never seen that before.
I'll look into that.
Again, it's hard to find information, but this affordable housing online where this chart came from clearly didn't know about that. Is there something else they clearly don't know about? Again, it goes back to where we can source our data. It's, how good is the data?
Any other comments on 231? Move to 232, Renew Monona Loan Program. Just a comment on, loans will be funded through the use of TIF funds from a closing TIF district in the city, or we
We pulled out it somewhere else.
We pulled some funding from that, so that's not the only source of funding or approval of from city council, but we didn't want to wait until the next TIF closed, so there's some money in the budget this year to help fund this.
Through TIF?
Eventually, it'll feed itself because the money will just recycle.
Is that money coming through TIF, the additional money that was another
There was
district?
a law change that allowed you to keep TIF one more year.
Right, I remember that.
And the revenue from, and that entire chunk of money has to go for affordable housing, but it's defined by the community.
So the reason I asked if it's coming through a TIF, we could just strike from a closing TIF district. And just the loans will be funded through the use of TIF funds.
Mhm.
Just end it there, if that's accurate.
I don't remember, if you could just check, Sonia, with Pat on where the monies came from.
I think it would more accurately say initially funded through TIF funds.
There you go.
Because I don't think the continuing funding can come from a TIF. It's just from the initial closing of one, but.
Okay.
I can clarify.
But once this thing cycles through, it'll just
Self-fund,
self-fund.
hopefully.
The library will close in 1 minute. Please
Um,
return to the main desk for checkout. At the checkout,
233, assisted living,
the time is all pages to please
pretty self-explanatory. And are we finally, Mr. Holmquist,
Well,
goals and objectives?
hang on, I see one thing that I kind of missed. In table 211, we talk about specialty programs, and really they're indicating why people are there. The one that just jumps out is the third one down, public funding. Everything else is really talking about why you're there. This one doesn't indicate why you're there.
Yeah, so those are how they're categorized on their licenses from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. Maybe you know what RCAC means. I had it written down. It's residential care. It's some more general category than CVRF or an adult family home. So they're receiving assisted care, and I think the public funding is just.
It can be much more general care that it doesn't meet the same, it doesn't meet the intensity of the CBRF. It's lower than that, so it could be talked about general needs somehow in the specialty program. The reason they're assisted living isn't because of public funding, it's because of something else, of why they are in a RCAC.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's some
added-
generic term that we
So
can put
added
there.
some sort of a description
Yep.
of the services that are provided or the clientele that are served.
Yep.
Well, looks like we've focused on the clientele that are served and the others rather than the services provided, so, yeah. Thank you. All right, now we're on your page. Goals. We were going to come back to, I said cost burden.
And it had to do with the objective 213, the last policy statement. If that captures what I think Chris was supposed to point out.
Objective 223, encourage the preservation of historic homes. I know people who have older homes and they do not want them to become designated historic places because it limits what they can do to them. Big time. So is that something that we want to focus on?
Well, I'll speak to it in more general terms, that the goal of maintaining and improving the quality of existing housing in Monona, one objective of that would be, is if someone is in a home that has historic characteristics, that one of the things would be, there are some owners that we would want to encourage them to consider it. It doesn't mean that they would have to. An individual owner has to make that decision. Someone can't put your home on the register for you. You have to be a willing participant. What comes with that is a variety of things. There are restrictions, but there are also pieces of that that can help maintain and improve the quality of that house. So I support the objective and the policy of it, but it doesn't mean that if you live in an international home, that I'm going to come to you and say, you need to register it with the Historical Society.
Well, it's kind of what it's saying, because we're encouraging people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So is the rest of the commission, thoughts?
I thought separate from the plan commission, that the city had gone on record as favoring the preservation of certain historic monuments and sites. I guess I don't have any problem with this. It's encourage the owners to register. It doesn't say that we're trying to compel them to do it.
Sharon?
Yeah, I agree with Griff. It's not saying you must do this, so it encourages not a bad
Rob?
term, I think.
I would agree.
Okay.
Ambivalent.
Ambivalent, okay. Any other feedback, any other feedback on the goals section? Going once, twice?
Well, I think
Yep.
Well done.
Objection 213 gets to something that Chris was talking about, promote ownership in the city to increase the number of owner-occupied housing. I don't know that we have to be much more specific than that. I mean, if we're always going to be looking at specific proposals, whether it's an apartment or whether it's a condo or whether it's a re-subdivision of some existing property. But this gives us a basis for encouraging owner-occupied. But I don't think we're ever going to be able to just strictly go by a percentage of owner-occupied space in Monona versus a percentage of owner-occupied space elsewhere.
Okay.
Generally, I think we're probably in line with the other communities in the county, and I think this is an adequate indication of the value that is placed on owner-occupied housing.
One minor correction that I saw underneath objective 221 in the policy, ensure that Monona, I believe that should be homes, are appropriately maintained. We don't want to maintain homeowners. That's a lot of work.
I don't know. Monona homeowners may want their appearance enhanced.
Yeah, yeah.
That could help.
Anything else, Sonia? Thank you. I know this is,
I just want one comment. I disagree a little bit with what you said. I think we have to watch it, because how many apartment units have we added in the last 5 years? What's the number? 200-300? And we're a community of only 4,000 units. Now, we've added a 5% swing, and if we're coming up and we have a few more, we do another 200-300, we've made a major swing in the rental occupied versus owner occupied in our community. We're a small community. I think these swings with as many apartments as we've seen lately can have a serious effect on our community. So I think it is something that we should at least be aware of what's happening and write our policy based on where we think we see it going, and if there's some way we want to swing it one way or the other.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I think the general statement of promoting owner-occupied housing gives us a lever to review that in light of those kinds of considerations. And I'd rather see it stated that way than to try and define a goal in terms of percentages.
No, I don't want to define a goal. I want the information so I know where we're at. And I work in a lot of communities. I think, from what I see, we're high. We're very high or low, I should say, for owner-occupied, to be the best way to define it. So I'd like to know that, because if we have that data, then I would just like to write it in a couple of these other areas a little stronger, like in the multifamily, that we want to encourage or tilt that more towards owner-occupied versus rental. So I think that's appropriate in the housing comprehensive plan element to start crafting it based on what we see has been happening, because we're looking at a lot of added apartment units for a fairly small community.
well, we're going to,
Part of the difficulty is, as you pointed out too, that we are, in some senses, a separate community, but we're also a part of the larger metropolitan urban area of Madison. And that whole area thing is changing.
Yep.
So where that leads us ultimately, I don't know. But
I don't either.
I think it's a practical matter. What's going to happen with us is there's a proposal that's going to come before us for either a condo or an apartment unit on a particular site. If it's a mixed use kind of thing, that might dictate apartments as opposed to condos.
Right?
If it's not, then, certainly if there's a development along Norbertine property and everything, with all the condos along there, it would be much more logical to have a condo there than to put up an apartment there. So I'm just saying that I think the specifications of the site are going to be more important than our general predilection. But I don't disagree with you that it's an area to be concerned about.
well, we've got some information coming that'll help us at the next meeting. And again, thank you.
Yes.
I know this is a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. All right, so we'll revisit this. It says review and approval. Do we have to table this, or do we just notes that we're going to, unless somebody wants to make a motion for approval? Seeing none, we'll just, okay, let's go to 7A, staff report regarding status of development project proposals.
Okay, so just a brief status update on the comprehensive plan. We got our first look at housing, and we'll bring it back. We have community utilities, facilities, and services to do, and then implementation. So that wraps up the elements that need to be updated. We'll be working on the survey over the next month. As we discussed at a previous meeting, the survey will be advertised in the newsletter. So once that newsletter hits households, then we'll launch the online survey, leave enough time for it to be open, and then we'll start looking at the results. Land Use Committee, the subcommittee met this morning to start talking about areas on our future land use map and possible zoning changes, so that's moving along.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So that's the comprehensive plan update. Next meeting is March 23rd. We will have Royal Capital Group on the agenda as a pre-hearing conference. They were scheduled initially for this meeting, and then the application was withdrawn. So they'll be on for a pre-hearing conference on March 23rd. We're still waiting on building signage from Legacy Martial Arts. They needed some further revisions. Traced on the Waters, moving forward with a marina. That's been a part of the plans, but was not specifically reviewed by the Plan Commission. It needs approval of a zoning permit by the Plan Commission, so we'll be looking at that. Also, the wayfinding template has been up on Monona Drive for about a week as you approach Femrite Drive going north. So take a look at that if you haven't already, and we'll be looking at the design at an upcoming Plan Commission meeting.
What were some of the comments on the wayfinding sign that you've got so far?
Gotten just a couple of comments that said it was readable and looked nice.
Was there, I think there was comments about the font and the difference between that sign and some of the other signs with readability? Or am I dreaming that up?
I didn't see that
Maybe I
comment.
was. All right. I'll relook at it. I thought it came from the mayor.
And this sign is the final product would have a reflective material. Right now at night it disappears, but there'll be a reflective material that you can read. In other words, I had mentioned something too. It seems you got to look up at it. I think it could be positioned. You go down, all street signs are like right here, right out of your field of view, and this thing, it seemed to be you had to reach back to see it. But otherwise, there's been some good comments. They like the design.
Okay.
All right.
So in general, you also all received these documents by email, just listing city projects that could come up over the next few months, and I put that together because the sign code revision was requested at the last meeting, so trying to figure out where we might be able to start looking at the sign code as we wrap up the comprehensive plan. I think best case scenario, depending on private applications that come in, would be the end of April. But we're starting to dig into the details on that.
Thank you. 7B, Plan Commission request for information concerning development projects. Ms. Stromberg?
I like the new format on this. Love it compared to what it used to be.
Anything else? Seeing none? Agenda item 8.
Move adjournment.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Thank you, everybody.